What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my Star Wars story time, whatever we're calling it. Last time, we finished up The Queen's Bloom, the story of Axel Greylark and his friends as they go to try to celebrate the Queen's Bloom Festival. If you haven't watched it, be sure to check it out. There will be a link to the playlist of this whole ordeal of all these stories up on the screen at the end of this video. Now, after that, I should say, we are heading into the Tales of Enlightenment series. And this is a series of books or a series of stories, rather, that were published in the Star Wars Insider. And we're going to be heading into the first story of those today. They'll be split up throughout the whole thing because they're all placed in different times. But this one is called Tales of Enlightenment New Prospects by George Mann. George Mann has written several other Star Wars books, and he's a very good author. I'm excited for this, and if you're excited, please be sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for Star Wars stories every single week. Now, let me get this light adjusted here. I now have a reading light for myself since it's dark in here, and I don't want to illuminate the whole room, because it's messy back there. I don't like having it shown. This is my storage room. We just kind of throw shit in here. We don't have any storage in our house. We don't have an attic or anything. So we just kind of throw shit in here. Anyway, Tales of Enlightenment, New Prospects, Part 1 by George Mann. Let's go. Another cold night on Jeddah. Not that there was anything strange about that. Every night was cold on Jeddah. This music is loud. Holy crap. Every night was cold on Jeddah. Cold and quiet. In fact, pretty much every day in the Holy City was the same. Keth Carapath would wake up, inevitably late, and hurry to work in the Temple of the Kyber, where his days as an adjunct passed in silent solitude, measured out by the predictable rhythm of his chores, day in, day out, always the same. It wasn't that Keth was not satisfied with his lot. More that he longed for something to happen, just once. An interruption to the order of things. Something exciting and different. Something he'd be able to talk about in years to come. The sort of story he could tell over a drink. His story. But hoping hadn't gotten him very far. Nothing really changed. Pilgrims came and went. The seasons turned. The preachers preached. Such was his life. And yet, there was one thing that Keth hoped would never change. That was enlightenment. The tap bar was down a quiet side street, close to the markets, with a big red double door emblazoned with its name in Arabesh. Enlightenment was anything but dour, and that was what Keth liked about it. He nodded to the two all but identical towering figures at the door as he strode in. Camille, Delphine, looking wonderful tonight as always. Enlightenment's duo of immense Gluven bodyguards, the Twinkle sisters, stared back at him blankly, but stood aside to allow him to pass all the same. He hurried down the steps. On the stage, Madalena, the electro-harpist, was attacking the instrument with her usual aplomb. Keth supposed her music was meant to be soothing, but in truth it was bemusing and impenetrable as the Itochi herself. Still, familiarity had bred a certain fondness. He had often found himself humming her strange, looping compositions as he went about his day. He crossed to the bar, where Creighton, the Villarandi owner of Enlightenment, with his large, segmented body and multiple insectoid limbs, appeared to be deep in conversation with a human woman that Keth had never seen. Keth presumed they were engaged in some business transaction or other. Enlightenment had always been a haven for any and all people, from across the galaxy, no matter their religion, species, or creed. Neutral territory, a place where you checked your issues and aggravations at the door. But that also meant that Creighton got to talk with a lot of interesting people, and he wasn't beyond passing on what he knew for the right price. In fact, he'd become the go-to person on Jeddah for anyone who needed, well, pretty much anything. Other than disturb them, it never paid to disturb Creighton. Keth sought out his usual seat at the bar, where Pirali, a Salustan dock worker, and Muna, a green-skinned Twi'lek who never seemed to leave the place, were already bickering over some hypothetical, most likely ridiculous situation. It was their favorite pastime. "Hey, kid," said Muna, raising her glass in acknowledgement as Keth slid onto a stool. "You're late." Keth shrugged. P3 needed a bit of fine-tuning. P37A was Keth's droid, saved from scrap and rebuilt by Bonbrax, who had given it to the vocoder of an old temple droid that had been decommissioned by Keth's employers. As such, it could only speak in epithets derived from the other droid's limited vocab database. It had a reputation for being a little pious, despite the fact that Keth knew most of what it was. Oh my goodness, most of what it said was its frustrated attempts at searing sarcasm. It had been barred from Enlightenment soon after its first visit. You'd be better scrapping off that thing," said Pirali. "More trouble than it's worth." Or, "You'd be better off scrapping that thing," said Pirali. "More trouble than it's worth." Forgot to give him his voice. "Every night," said Keth, rolling his eyes. "You had nothing better to worry about than my droid?" "Hey, I'm just looking out for a friend. No harm in that, is there?" "You ignore him, kid," said Muna. "He's only jealous." "Jealous? I can get myself beat up easy enough. I don't need no droid to rile up the locals for me." "Never a truer word said," muttered Muna under her breath. Keth nodded to old Shantho, the Ithorian barkeep. "What are you having, Keth?" The Ithorian's voice buzzed from from a small box there on his throat. "I'll take a Retza." "Tough day?" Keth shrugged. Same old, same old." He glanced back at the woman talking to Creighton. "Who's the newcomer?" Crowley took a swig from his glass of blue Mappa, then leaned forward in his seat, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Prospector. Washed up here. Prospector. Washed up here after a job went wrong. Graydon's ringing her for information." Keth eyed the woman for a moment longer, then turned back to the others. "Busy tonight." You could see a table of Dagoyan masters huddled in one of the alcoves, and a lone robed figure wearing a skull mask that could only be one of the brothers of the Ninth Door, a local secretive sect. Other tables were overflowing with pilgrims, tourists, and locals, their voice raised in a mix of merriment and healthy debate. Said Pirali. "It's only going to get worse, too, with the festival the convocation's planning. Soon we won't be able to move in here for tourists." All good for business, yes," came a reedy voice from over Keth's shoulder. "But worry not, my friends. Creighton will always ensure the seats remain empty for his favorites." Keth turned to see Creighton and the prospector woman standing behind him. "Oh, hey, Creighton." "Keth, my boy, it is good to see you." Creighton angled his rippling body to indicate the woman by his side. "Here, meet Creighton's new acquaintance, Saretha Von Beale. She is a hyperspace prospector in need of work." "And a drink," said the woman. Her accent was thick and unfamiliar. She was tall and muscular, with dark brown skin and blonde hair. "But alas, all of her credits were lost during a terrible incident. Creighton is most sad to hear her poor situation." Keth glanced at Pirali and Muna, then back at the woman. "You have somewhere to stay? I work at the Temple of the Kyber. I could speak with one of the disciples." Saretha shook her head. "No, thank you. I still have my ship, though she's in a sorry state. She's in for repairs, but I try to find some way to pay for them." "What happened to you?" asked Muna. "How do you know? Pirates, Jedi, monsters." Saretha smiled. "Jedi," said Keth, trying to keep the reverence out of his voice. "Yeah, but it's a long story." Prospector shrugged. "You've got time," said Keth, settling back on his stool. "All right, I know. How about I'll tell you my story for the price of a drink?" She cocked a smile. Keth glanced down at the others, and then shot her a glance of his own. "Okay, deal." He turned to old Chanto. I'll get this, whatever she wants. He narrowed his eyes as he looked back at the grinning prospector. Within reason. Oh, I don't have expensive tastes. A Retza will do nicely. Keth breathed a little sigh of relief. He gestured to a stool. Saritha sat, while old Chanto poured her a suspiciously generous-looking measure of Retza. Speaking of drinks. The prospector eyed the glass with appreciation. Oh, I've been waiting for this. She picked it up, tipped her head back, and downed the entire contents of the glass in one deft movement. The empty glass hit the bar with a clink. Saritha sighed. That's better. Crowley gave a short, sharp burst of laughter. No, I like her, he said, reaching for his own drink. So, the story, prompted Muna. Saritha wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Have any of you ever been to Batu? She studied their blank expressions. I'll take that as a no. Well, I'd been working in the Outer Rim, using Black Spire Outpost as a base. Scoping out new hyperspace routes? Asked Keth. Trying to. The routes around Batu are pretty much mapped, so I was pushing out further and further into the frontier. Of course, that brings bigger rewards, if you can find the passage. But it also brings bigger risks. Pirates, said Muna. Saritha nodded. Pirates, and particularly ugly ones at that. She wrapped her fingertips on the bar, and just emerged from a new route. Not an especially useful one, but I'd mapped it all the same. Ready to register. Pirates were waiting for me when I completed my completed my jump. They were expecting you? This realized the book actually has a typo here. It says, let's see if it picks up here on the camera. It says, it will not focus, but right here it says, sure you can see the gap in the word. It says, they were expecting you. Not they were. Now where was I? There. Said Prowley. Saritha shrugged. Perhaps they could have tracked me from Batu. Or someone might have sold me out. Either way, I stood no chance. They clamped me with a tractor beam and blew the airlock. I managed to take a Nemodian down with a hypo wrench, but the others were too quick. They knocked me out with a stun baton and dragged me onto their ship while they pillaged everything I owned. I'm sorry, said Keth, but you must have escaped. You're here, I mean. Whoa, who's getting ahead of himself? Sorry, said Keth a little sheepishly. Go on. When I came around, I was lying in a cell. It was dark and dank. There was nothing but a dirty old cot and a bucket in the corner. My head was on fire. I remember groaning as I tried to sit up. That was when I first saw him. Who? The Jedi. Keth took another sip of his drink. This was getting good. He'd seen Jedi before, of course, here on Jeddah, but he'd never actually spoken to one. He always wanted to, but the time had never quite seemed right. He was just sitting there on the floor of the next cell, his legs crossed, his hands resting on his knees. Saritha went on. His eyes were closed, and it looked like he was asleep. Well, he must have noticed me looking, because he sighed loudly, and without turning his head, he said, "This is unfortunate." "Unfortunate isn't the word," I said. "Everything I own is on that ship." And that's when he opened his big brown eyes, turned his head to look at me, and said, "Ownership is merely a transitory state in the temporal existence of an object. Most things will outlive their original custodians several lifetimes over. It is a useful perspective. Free." "Sounds like your droid, Keth," said Pirali. "If you've ever met Master Lee Harrow, you know that he doesn't say much, but when he does, he never knowingly uses one word when three would do. I'm sure that when that man dreams, it's of star charts and ancient forgotten languages. He exudes knowledge from his very pores. But right there and then, in that cell, He was grumpy, said Zaretha. Well, I'd be pretty grumpy too if I found myself stuck in a dingy cell on a pirate ship, said Pirali. That's just it. Master Haro wasn't grumpy because he was stuck in a cell. He was grumpy because he was going to have to get out of it. That doesn't make sense, said Muna. Very little about that man makes sense, said Zaretha. So, what happened? Said Keth. Suppose you'll be wanting your ship back, said the Jedi with a big sigh. And he slowly got to his feet, rolled his shoulders, reached out his hand. Something clattered against the bars of his cell. Then it was in his hand, and his lightsaber was igniting with the brightest blue glow I'd ever seen. He nodded at me just once, and he slashed the bars in front of his cell, cutting away the 3 short strokes of his shimmering blade. He made straight for the exit. I shouted after him. Wasn't he going to free me too? He just ignored my plea and strolled off as if he didn't have a care in the world. Can't believe a Jedi would leave you stranded like that. I can, muttered Muna. 10 minutes later, he was back, said Zaretha. Somehow he'd managed to round up every single pirate, the entire crew, and lock them in the hold. He opened my own cell with a flick of his laser sword and showed me back to my ship. Of course, they'd already been through all my stuff. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. But here's the thing I don't understand, said Kath. The Jedi could have done that at any point, as if all it took was a force trick to get his lightsaber back. He could have been free any time he wanted. Exactly, said Zaretha. He'd chosen not to. But why? Because, it turns out, he'd got himself caught on purpose. Zaretha laughed. Not because he was trying to infiltrate the pirates or anything, you understand, but because they were headed in the right direction for him, and he wanted a ride. He what? Said Pirali. Zaretha nodded. I know how it sounds, but that's the sort of man Lee Haro is. There was this planet he wanted to reach, deep in the Outer Rim, a place called Vexus. Something to do with research. It seems the pirates were going that way. Haro had lost his own ship after some incident with the gravity sink on the planet Chardis. So he got in the way of the pirates on Batuu and got himself locked in their cell for the duration of the trip. Till I turned up, of course, and he felt obliged to help me. That's the Jedi way, said Keth. What happened next? Asked Muna. I felt responsible, of course. If he hadn't helped me, he'd have still been on his way to Vexus. It seemed important to him, so once we'd disentangled ourselves from the pirate ship, I offered to drop him off. Little did I know the place was going to be seething with enormous monsters, but that Master Haro was soon going to get us eaten by one of them. Eaten? Said Kath, trying to keep the disbelief out of his voice. No, you're just tugging my leku, added Muna. You heard me, said Zaretha. Eaten. She folded her arms across her chest as if that was the end of the story. But how? Zaretha offered Kath a beaming smile. Well, if you want to know the rest, you'll just have to stump up for another drink. All this talking is thirsty work, I'll say. Kath heaved a huge sigh of mock surrender and gestured for old Chantho to top up her glass. Then he settled back in his seat and took another swig of his own retza, sighing with satisfaction. The night was looking up. To be continued. And that is the end of Tales of Enlightenment. What was this one called again? New Prospects, Part 1. And next time it will be Part 2. So, if you are wanting to know the rest of the story before then, pick up Star Wars The High Republic, Tales of Enlightenment by George Mann. It'll give you the whole collection of the Star Wars Tales of Enlightenment series. And it's great. But also be sure to like and subscribe so you can hear me tell the second half of the story next week. So thank you for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Goodbye.